over the years, the Madden NFL series has lost some of its fan favorite features. But what's interesting about this is, not all of those losses were at the hands of EA, but rather the league that they answer to. When you partner with the NFL to use their license, you have to obey their requests of what they do or don't want in the game, as they see the game as a direct representation of their brand. If they see something in game that they think is a bad look for their brand, or something that they don't want associated with them at all, they will have EA remove it. We all know the nickname for the NFL is the No Fun League, and when you find out what they've had removed from Madden and why, the nickname will make even more sense than it did before. Now, I did do a video just like this last year, but I thought it was important to do kind of an updated version of the video and give more context and go a little bit more in depth about the actual things that the NFL banned from the Madden game, as well as touch on something new that happened after that video was published. So let's start with the thing that I see mentioned most. From my time doing YouTube, one of the most common things I see said in the comment section is, "Man, I wish they would bring back helmets popping off. It was so cool to hit stick somebody and see their helmet go flying." Now, this went hand in hand with the hit stick, which is probably the best feature ever added to Madden. It felt so rewarding to line a player up perfectly and knock him back in the next week as his helmet flew off his head. But, as we all know, those helmets don't quite do that anymore in Madden. And I'm here to tell you that this was not an EA decision to remove this from the game. This was actually the NFL. And this is one of the few things that makes sense, I suppose, seeing as they're trying to completely remove themselves from the conversation of being too dangerous and trying to avoid head injuries more than ever. I mean, just look at the rule changes in the NFL. You can no longer hit a defenseless receiver. If the play is too bang bang, you'll likely get flagged even if you led with your shoulder instead of your helmet. If you've watched football at all lately, you know what I'm talking about. The NFL doesn't like big hits being glorified, so they requested that EA removed the helmets popping off of players in Madden, even though we still see it happen every year in the league. This feature was removed after 2006 and will likely never make a return again. It's actually still surprising to me that the hit stick has been able to survive all of this, and in fact, a lot of the ragdoll hit sticks have gotten even more crazy in Madden, but for some reason those helmets popping off is just taking it a bit too far in terms of how the NFL sees it. Now, this leads directly into the next thing that the NFL banned from Madden. While we're on the topic of big hits and helmets popping off, what type of injuries are often caused by this? You know, those injuries where you get up from the ground a little woozy and you aren't sure where you are for a few seconds. Yeah, if you've played any level of football, even in your own front yard, you've probably had one. We're talking about concussions. Boy, is the league trying their hardest to separate themselves from that word. With more and more doctors and specialists coming forward with information about just how dangerous this head injury can be, the NFL would like to do everything in its power to make sure that they don't exist anymore. And we all know they still happen pretty often in real football, but that doesn't mean that they have to happen in Madden. Those dangerous injuries can be removed from the virtual gridiron, and the NFL made sure that they were. This one isn't that big of a deal for me. It doesn't really affect the game. I believe head injuries can still happen in the game, but they're extremely rare, and they're never called concussions. The NFL as a brand doesn't want anything to do with bad publicity, and while they can't fully escape concussions in real life, they were able to do so in Madden. So I guess we might as well keep the same theme going for a little bit longer. The next thing on the list that the NFL had removed from Madden is something that also has to do with injuries. One of the biggest fan favorites of all time, the ambulance. Back in the old days of Madden, whenever you hurt a member of the opposing team badly enough, he would have to get carted off the field, much like real life. This was a big moment in the game, especially if you were playing against friends. It was a bragging rights kind of thing. The ambulance would come cruising onto the field, but the great thing about it was, it would literally run over any players that were in its way. It would in fact injure more people in the process of taking away the original injured player. It was a lot of fun while it lasted, but eventually the league wasn't having it anymore, as they felt that it kind of glorified injuries a bit too much. The NFL dropped the ban hammer on this after Madden 2001, which someone makes that game a little bit special, as it was the last version of the game to feature the ambulance. So now it's time to switch gears a little bit and talk about arguably the biggest missed feature of Madden these days. And this one is a bit more controversial because the verdict is still out on whether or not this was an official NFL ban. Nobody seems to know for sure, as we've heard reliable sources on both sides of this argument. I'm talking about the Create a Team feature. Create a Team is one of the most crucial aspects of sporting games these days. Being able to expand your leagues, create your own custom teams, custom logos, colors, stadiums, you name it. This type of thing thrived in games like NCAA 14 and currently thrives in games like NBA 2K. Now, the rumor for a while was that the NFL banned this, and I believe that to be half true. I'll explain. There are articles out from people who work for EA or have worked for EA that point out that they work closely with the NFL on what can and can't be in the game. We already know this. When it comes to editing or creating teams, the NFL wanted to make sure that league policies were consistent and that they didn't want to see things like the Raiders logo on a pink helmet. So if you wanted to create a team using NFL logos, you had to adhere to the NFL's strict rules. If you wanted more freedom, you had to use the custom logos that were approved by the NFL. So even though team creation was a thing, it was still limited because of the NFL. It was nothing like how it is in NBA 2K, where you can literally upload your own logos and just go crazy with it. But was Create a Team in general eventually banned by the NFL altogether? Now, I've talked to former EA employees in the past who have said it was, but then there's other former employees who have said it wasn't. Softring Sports recently did a documentary on the Madden NFL series here on YouTube, which was a really great watch that I definitely recommend you check out. And he touched on this topic in particular. He went as far as to actually message Rex Dixon, the former creative director of Madden, and Rex pretty much said that it wasn't an NFL ban. He said to his knowledge the reason the feature went away entirely was a lack of resources and technology, which is a common thing we hear from EA all the time. He said, you see custom uniforms in Ultimate Team and you have relocation teams in franchise, so customization is still allowed by the NFL. As I said a little bit ago, I think the NFL ban is half true. I think that having a true free custom experience was banned by the NFL because the information says that it was. They don't want you messing with real team logos, and the custom logos that you did get had to be pre-approved by them before they went into the game. So it could never be anything like what we get in NBA 2K, where you can literally upload any crazy type of logo and do whatever you want. The NFL definitely isn't going to sign off on that. But the feature altogether didn't go away because of the NFL. That part is on EA. We would much rather have something instead of nothing, but for now, I guess the relocation teams is all we're going to get. Next up on the list is something extremely silly in my opinion. Have you ever seen a stadium in real life that wasn't full of people? Sure, we see it all the time. Every season, in fact. You ever notice that you never see that in Madden anymore? Remember dynamic attendance? If not, I'll tell you about it. In Madden 11, EA added a feature that was known as dynamic attendance. What this did was it used a variety of factors to determine the fan turnout for any given game. So things like team record, weather, and more would all be a factor in how full the stadium got. If your team was, let's say, 5-9 and playing in 20-degree weather on top of it, fans would likely think twice before showing up on that Sunday. But that was put to rest quickly as the NFL came, the No Fun League, and dropped the ban hammer once again. It's been said that team owners weren't happy about seeing their stadiums empty in games, even though their stadiums were often not full in real life. This led to the NFL banning dynamic attendance in Madden, and this is why you always see a full stadium, even if the Jets are 1-13 playing in the snow. This is another area that makes NBA games more immersive, as you'll often see arenas that aren't full when your team is struggling. Maybe one day the NFL won't be so uptight, but that's wishful thinking. Up next on the list is something that will definitely anger many fans of the Madden franchise. Customization, mainly when it comes to equipment, is another thing that the NFL has been very strict on. Now, we all know in real life, they fine players all the time for wearing equipment that doesn't meet their very strict guidelines. Things like not wearing the right cleats or the right gloves is a quick way to have to pay a nice hefty fine over to the NFL office. Now, we've seen EA work their best around this lately and give us most of what the NFL deems okay for players to wear, but the truth is we'll never see the crazy custom visors, cleats, or special gloves as long as the NFL has any say in this matter. We see all the time fans asking to get visors back in the game with logos on them or different colors, or some of the crazy gloves or cleats that these players wear in real life. If the NFL isn't allowing it in real life, they're definitely not going to allow players to wear this custom gear in Madden, where they actually have full control over it. Now, this last thing on the list is something a bit more controversial, and I'm talking about none other than Colin Kaepernick. Now, I'm sure most of you know about his situation with the NFL over the past couple of years. He was protesting, wound up in a lawsuit with the NFL, which eventually got settled a few months back. Now, he wasn't banned from Madden in a traditional sense. He was still in Madden 18, and while EA didn't have his rights to use him in Madden 19 because he was no longer a part of the Players Association, EA did reach out and try to obtain his rights directly, but it didn't work out. But that's not how the NFL tried to ban him from the game. Let's go back to Madden 18. In the Ultimate Team game mode at the end of the year, EA does a program called Golden Tickets, where 20 lucky people get to create a player of their choosing and make him into a super version of himself, a 99 overall with completely maxed out stats. Last year, many people were saying that if they got a golden ticket, they were going to create Kaepernick. He did have a base card in Ultimate Team, which normally was the requirement, but last year, after this hype started to pick up over creating Kaepernick, EA then came out and said that you could only create a player who was on a current roster or a legend that was released in the game mode. Now, this never seemed to be the case before, and would seem like the NFL stepping in and saying, this is a no-go. Which makes sense, I suppose. If you're in a lawsuit with somebody, it's probably not a good idea to have that player's likeness being profited on in the game. But the fact that his base card was still available to be used in the game mode kind of doesn't make sense to me. Fast forward to Madden 19, and the next big viral moment for EA. Madden was caught censoring Kaepernick's name in one of the songs on the Madden soundtrack in-game. After much uproar via social media and news websites, EA then came out and said it was a mistake, that whoever edited his name out misunderstood that while they didn't have the rights to Kaepernick, that didn't mean that his name couldn't be left in the song. But then come to find out, they actually censored his name from a song on the Madden 18 soundtrack in-game as well, when they did in fact have his rights. This one just went unnoticed by most people for a while until this recent situation popped up. EA kind of had to take the bullet for this one, as we all know this definitely came down from the NFL, but it was still a bad look for everybody involved. That's going to be it for today's video. This is everything that we know to our knowledge that the NFL has banned from Madden. Let me know below in your comments, how do you feel about this? What are some other features that have gone away that you want to see come back? Check out some of these other videos right here, and as always, I will see you guys next time.